Even though Nintendo usually produces high-quality titles that are still enjoyable to play years later, once in a while, they will come out with a game that is universally loathed by the majority of fans. This does rarely happen, but when it does, it sticks out so much in their vast library of games that it leads me into wanting to create today's video about the worst game in every Nintendo franchise. Here, I will try to go through each and every one of the company's series, and showcase the games that are universally hated by everyone. Oh yeah, and before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. I think it's pretty appropriate to start this video off by looking at the franchise that really caused Nintendo to explode in popularity in the Super Mario Bros. Although the Mario character had already appeared in several past arcade and Game & Watch titles, it wasn't until 1985 on the Nintendo Entertainment System where he'd officially receive his own series. With over 20 games spanning every console in the company's existence, it's a pretty common consensus that Super Mario Run for mobile devices is by far the worst. One reason to why people think this is due to the fact that you don't actually control Mario's lateral movement as he's continuously running, instead only controlling when he jumps by tapping the screen. This would drastically change the Mario experience for the worse, and this was evident in the level design, which would turn out to have a very linear feel with limited secrets. I think die-hard fans felt like there was no need for this title, as they would rather opt to play the real thing on a Nintendo system. Believe it or not, the second oldest Nintendo franchise is Metroid, where the original game was released in 1986 on the NES. With over a dozen titles in the main series, there's one that's by far hated by almost every fan and seems out of place in Metroid Other M. The plot of this entry is exceptionally bad, where they do an awful job at explaining Samus's backstory. This also completely strays away from what's usually the norm in the franchise, as it's supposed to be an action-adventure exploration game, and not something that's heavy in expositional cutscenes, especially bad ones.
I wondered if this too was a result of the power the baby gave me. Not even a fragment. None of the baby remained on me. I knew it to be true, but still couldn't help looking at my palm for a sign.
Another thing that really held the game back was the decision to only use the Wii's remote and not the added nunchuck, which greatly limited how Samus could move, resulting in the developers symbolizing many aspects of what made the previous games in the franchise so great. One example of this is the small amount of upgrades in this title, which means that the usual exploration sections were pretty much removed, making it extremely linear and safe. It's now been over a decade where a true 3D Metroid game has been released, as Nintendo decided to reflect on their mistake and really take time on making Metroid Prime 4. Nintendo's next franchise is The Legend of Zelda, which also started on the NES back in 1986. With a total of 25 games in the series, there are 3 titles that fans usually put on the worst end of the spectrum in the Skyward Sword, Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link, and the arcade-like Triforce Heroes. In my personal opinion, I'd have to excuse Zelda 2 as it was only the second game in the franchise, which tried to do something new and different even if it was a bit flat. Triforce Heroes I'd also have to give a pardon, as that game was just meant to be a co-op-like puzzle experience and not a serious single-player title. That means we're going to focus on the Skyward Sword for the Nintendo Wii as the worst game. And this is for no reason other than the fact that it forces you to use the system's motion controls. This is both an ambitious but limiting factor, as it made certain parts of the game more tedious than they really had to be. The Wiimote with Wii Motion Plus did make the game a lot easier than originally anticipated, but fans don't love titles entirely based around specific mechanics. Everything else about the game was just average, with the difficulty that pretty much holds your hand, level layouts that are boring, and enemies that are poorly designed. In all honesty, the game isn't terrible, which is actually a testament to the series that has repetitively produced great titles. Even though Donkey Kong is technically one of the oldest franchises with its arcade debut back in 1981, it wasn't until 1994 where he'd have his real home console series, starting with Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This is where the character ceased in being Mario's main antagonist, now taking the protagonist role in fighting the evil Lizard Tyrant, King K. Rool. Out of the countless main series games and spin-offs, by far the worst one, not counting the edutainment Donkey Kong Jr. math title, is the Donkey Konga series. At least being credited in coming out before a time where Guitar Hero and Rock Band became mainstream franchises, Donkey Konga for the GameCube used its own unique Konga drum controller, which was a great innovation for the time, even if the song choices were rather lame. Although initially seen as fun, fans eventually got tired of this gimmicky rhythm game, and this was seen by the third installment only being released in Japan. Although the Fire Emblem franchise originally debuted in Japan with a game called Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light in 1990, it wasn't until Marth and Roy's appearance in Super Smash Bros. Melee that North American markets started to pay attention to this series, that led to a game being developed for North America on the Game Boy Advance. In the 17 games in the series, most fans will agree that Fire Emblem Heroes for mobile devices is the worst of them all. The characters were made incredibly cutesy instead of their usual serious anime style, and many of them can't be collected unless you spend actual money. Of course, the game is free to play, so there's no complaint there. It's just that there's no real story other than fighting enemies on a map. This was an extremely slimmed down experience that does work on some levels, but diehard fans weren't happy with the simplicity of the end product. The next franchise to be created by the company was Kirby, that has well over 30 titles in total, ranging in style from platformers, to arena fighters, to puzzlers, and arcade setting games. Out of the pretty large library, I kept seeing online that the vast majority of people hated 2015's Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, that was released for the Wii U. This was actually a sequel to Kirby Canvas Curse on the DS, but where it made sense for that stylus-based game to exist, the Wii U version doesn't. This is because it takes your eyes away from the TV screen and forces you to look at the Wii U gamepad. For a home console game to be limited to such a small screen is upsetting, and even more that the Kirby signature copy ability was completely removed. One of the most interesting franchises in Nintendo's library is Wario's, as it's gone through several transformations over the years, starting off as a puzzle platformer, and eventually transitioning into a microgame specialist. In my opinion, the worst game with Wario's name attached to it is Game & Wario, that was released for the Wii U in 2013. Not only was this not a true WarioWare title as it focused on much longer minigames, but it also forced the player to use only the system's gamepad, which isn't as enjoyable to use as the Wiimote's motion controls. There are good things about this title, like a few fun minigames, it just didn't offer enough for that much enjoyable repetitive play. The other Wario title I want to mention, only because it was such a miss with fans, is WarioWare DIY, which really could have worked but ultimately was too rudimentary, resulting in underwhelming gameplay. You could at least download other people's creations and try them for yourself. However, the fun in this fades fast, and you won't want to continue playing for too long. Like the Wario franchise, Yoshi has gone through several changes throughout the years, starting off as a puzzle series on the NES, then transitioning more into the 2D platforming realm. Picking the worst game in this franchise was very easy for me, as I'll always remember the disappointed feeling when I first played Yoshi Touch and Go. Thinking this game was a follow-up to Super Mario World 2, I was disappointed to find that it was more of a side game, implementing the Nintendo DS's iconic touchscreen. The gameplay has no story, and instead there are 4 modes to choose from, including Score Attack, which is a 1,000-yard freefall to the stork while collecting coins, Marathon, where your yards traveled are counted and only ends when you die, Time Attack, which is based on both time and score, and finally Challenge, where players move horizontally and the time will increase the more enemies defeated and points earned. Although interesting in concept and approach, it just wasn't enough to keep me playing. Now, I might be a little biased when picking the worst game in the Pokemon franchise, But I only look down on Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu because they once again decided to make another playthrough of the original game. If you count sets, this is the 12th and 13th time they've done this. But they try to sell you on the Nintendo Switch's version having vastly better graphics in a new third-person style. They were also trying so hard to push out this new Pokeball peripheral, which did work well with the newly added Pokemon Go style of catching Pokemon. It was just a really unnecessary and kind of gimmicky addition. It's really disheartening to me that there are many mediocre games in the Star Fox franchise, as ever since the highly popular Star Fox 64, they haven't been able to quite get the formula right. Even though some people would pick Star Fox Adventures as the worst game because it deviated completely from the original formula, I think the real worst game is Star Fox Assault that was released for the GameCube in 2005. Although it is technically a rail-based vehicular shooter, there are many third-person based areas where Fox is on foot fighting enemies. These parts of the game felt really slow, the shooting was really clunky, and it just sort of seemed out of place. This was the only entry that was made by Namco and not Nintendo, which is why it probably felt a bit off when compared to the N64 version. The final of the main Nintendo franchises that I'm going to discuss in this video is the Animal Crossing one, that started off in Japan on the N64 in 2001. If you don't count some of the terrible spin-offs that have come from the series, then most fans will say that the worst in the mainline games is Animal Crossing City Folk, that came out for the Wii in 2008. The main complaint from this title, which actually wasn't terrible, is that it's just way too much of the same from the previous two entries. This just really upset fans because of the lack of innovation that was shown in this highly anticipated release, and because of that, causes many to regard it as bad. Moving on now to the Nintendo Party franchises, starting with the Mario Kart series, the worst game to me is hands down the mobile phone-driven Mario Kart Tour. I just can't bring myself to like a game in the series where you have to use the phone touchscreen to control your racer, which just leads to some very awkward feeling gameplay. Now, I could have excused this as an attempt by Nintendo to try something new in a market they aren't usually part of. That is, if it wasn't for the constant microtransactions that they repeatedly try to shove in your face. Now, it is a free-to-play game, and don't get me wrong, you don't have to pay a single penny to have fun. It's just that if you want to unlock specific characters, carts, and accessories, you'll have to pay up some dough. On top of all that, the collection of these goods is through the highly controversial gacha method, meaning that you aren't even guaranteed to get what you want. I think there are certain things Nintendo got right about this entry, and others they got completely wrong. Probably the toughest franchise to pick the worst game from has to be the Super Smash Bros. One, as quite honestly, there isn't a horrible title in this Nintendo fighting series. If I did have to pick one on the lower end of the spectrum, I would go with the original N64 release, only because it's a very limited experience in comparison to the rest of the games. In this original version that came out in 1999, there were only 12 characters in total to choose from, in comparison to the 88 that are usable in the most current version, meaning that you had almost no variety in picking someone that fit your playstyle. Honestly, that's the only downside to this title, and I was hard-pressed to even include it as I have such fond memories of playing hours of it with my friends. Unfortunately, I have to pick one, and it's just that it was more of a title that set the groundwork for future iterations, and not one that really blew you away. Up next in the Nintendo multiplayer realm is the Mario Party franchise, which debuted on the N64 in 1999, leading to an almost annual release of a title. Having played basically every single game in the series, it's pretty safe to say that the worst is Mario Party Advance for the Game Boy Advance, basically because it's not a traditional multiplayer experience that everybody wanted. I remember it all feeling very strange and out of place when I first picked up the game in 2005. And there was some fun to be had in the minigames, there just wasn't enough replay value to make you want to keep coming back to it. This game probably received the worst review out of any Nintendo game I've ever seen, where Kristen Reed from Eurogamer gave the game an abysmal 1 out of 10, stating, "On paper there's loads to do, but you'll not feel compelled to do very much of it, even to try it out. After a few hours of roaming around Shroom City, playing minigames and quests, you'll have seen more than enough. And if you haven't gotten the message yet, Mario Party Advance is possibly the worst video game Nintendo has had the misfortune to publish. Avoid it at all costs. This is disgracefully bad. Ouch, I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but what a review. The last Nintendo franchise we're going to look at are the sports-based ones that have appeared across all the company's consoles. And although they can be separated into several different sub-series, it's without a doubt that Mario Tennis Ultra Smash is one that really rubbed fans the wrong way. Once again, a Wii U title makes an appearance in this video, and quite honestly, Nintendo just really dropped the ball completely with the system. There's just not a lot to do in this game, as it completely ditches tournament mode, campaigns, Mario-themed courts, and stadiums, or any special minigames, instead adding a very strange Mega Battle mode, where your character is randomly thrown Mega Mushrooms making you giant. This is an extremely gimmicky feeling that adds absolutely nothing to the gameplay, just like this game adds nothing to the franchise. There are some franchises I left out of this video, only because there wasn't a big enough of a sample size, but if there is one that you guys think really should have been included, then please let me know in the comments below. Also, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I do now have an Instagram at Copycat Gamer, where I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!